From Washington to Moscow, New York to Paris, Rome to Jerusalem, the prophecies of the Bible are being fulfilled. Stand by for J.R. Church and today's Prophecy in the News.
On our last program, we started a study of the Old Testament, comparing each book, beginning with Genesis, to the various letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And it is an absolutely incredible study. It has a perfection about it that shows that each of these books, indeed, in their present order, as if you were to go to the table of contents in the front of your Bible and write out the first Hebrew letter by Genesis, and the second Hebrew letter by Exodus, and the third by Leviticus, and so on, in the perfect order in which they appear in our modern Bible, they compare with the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And we got through 13 of those letters on our last program. We're going to crank up again. Gary Stearman is here. We've got some fascinating things ahead.
Yes, we have. We left off at the 13th letter, which brings us to the 14th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Nun. And I want to preface this quickly by saying that the sages of Israel teach and have taught for millennia, literally, that God gave the Hebrew alphabet. It's not an invention of man.
Yeah.
And each of the letters of the Hebrew alphabet is a symbol for a quality having something to do with God's redemptive plan and purpose. And we find that all the way through the Old Testament, beautifully.
Yeah. And Jesus was introduced as the Word in John chapter 1. And at His second coming in Revelation chapter 19, He is called, and His name is called the Word of God. That's a quote. And then Jesus said, I am the Alpha and the Omega, meaning He's the first letter and the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. In the opening verse of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. In the Hebrew language, the middle word of those 7 Hebrew words is spelled with an aleph and a tav. That is the first and last letters of the Hebrew alphabet, which caused a rabbinical commentary to say one day, in the beginning God created the aleph and the tav and all the rest of the alphabet, and with that He created everything else.
That's right.
So the alphabet is indeed divine.
Yes.
Now, there are 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, and yet some of you are saying, but there are 39 books of our Old Testament. But in the first century, those 39 books were only in 22 divisions. Flavius Josephus in AD 100 wrote that they had 22 books of the Old Testament. And Origen, a church historian and theologian in the year around the year 250 AD, wrote and listed the 22 books of the Old Testament. Fascinating, isn't it, Gary?
Yeah, one of those 22 books had the 12 minor prophets in it. So you can see the numbering was quite different.
Yes. So there were no 1st and 2nd Samuel, just Samuel. No 1st and 2nd Chronicles, no 1st and 2nd Kings. Ruth was attached to Judges. Ezra and Nehemiah were combined together. Lamentations was a part of Jeremiah. And so you can see they got, out of 39 books, they got 22 divisions. And the fascinating thing about that is the 22, I think, stands for the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, which we are convinced of, and we have given you half of them and hope to give you the other half today. But the 39 books of the Old Testament, I think, is a special message from God to the Jews. 39 is made up of 13 plus 13 plus 13. 13 is the number of the curse, the number of rebellion. And this is God's message that they failed to observe the law. And 39 is the number of lashes in punishment. And I guess if there had been 40 books to the Old Testament, God would have been done with the Jews. But he only has 39 books, which says that God's not finished with the Jews yet. God has not forever forsaken the Jews. He's just punished them 39 stripes. And that's what the Old Testament's all about. It's the law. It's the judgment and the curse and the punishment from God upon the Jew. But with Matthew, we have a new beginning, don't we?
We do indeed, J.R.
Redemption.
Absolutely. Redemption continues to its conclusion. Now, in our last broadcast, we looked at the letter Mem, which has a numerical value of 40, the number of testing. That applied to Job. Now we come to the book of Psalms.
And he was the 13th book, too. So the number 13 is connected with this idea of the punishment.
Absolutely. Now we come to Psalms. And we come to the 14th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the letter Nun, which is a very interesting letter in and of itself. It has a value of 50. And
that's number of grace.
The number of grace. Multiplied.
The Jubilee.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the grace multiplied, actually, by 10. And coming up with Jubilee. And then Nun, the word Nun actually means fish. And Jesus associated his redemptive work with fishing. And he said, I'm going to make you fishers of men. And so the symbol of the fish is connected with the redemptive work of Christ. And the Jews say that the letter Nun is the symbol of faithfulness, soul, and emergence. And I want to read the opening statement in Psalms. Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly. Blessed is the man is more or less the theme of the entire Psalms.
Yes.
All the Psalms.
The emergence of Israel.
Yeah, absolutely.
The reunification. The redemption of Israel. This Peh is the message, or that is the Nun is the message of the Psalms. And we see that so clearly in the Psalms today.
We really do. Nun also is the number associated with the soul of man. It is the number of service.
So it's not only a physical redemption, but a spiritual redemption of Israel is the theme of the Psalms.
And Nun has two forms. When it's used in the middle of a word, it's bent. When it's used at the end of a word, it's straight. The bent form is said to represent one who bends before the Lord, humbly submitting himself to God's will. The straight form is said to be like the upright, standing upright before the judgment seat of God in the end of days.
In the end of days.
Yeah.
And that's the message in the Psalms, isn't it?
It certainly is.
We have a book called Hidden Prophecies in the Psalms, where we've actually discovered in the Psalms that each psalm is numbered according to the year in this century of what happened to the Jews. I'm telling you the truth here. I know it sounds mind-boggling to you, but it's the truth. Psalm 48 gives the story of the rebirth of Israel in 1948. Psalm 91, for example, tells the story of Operation Desert Storm in Psalm 91. Yeah. Psalm 92 fit perfectly with its theme as Israel prepares for war. It's going to be interesting to see what Psalm 93 offers for us in the months ahead.
So it is.
And so the Psalms are literally noted by the 14th letter, as it is the 14th division of the 22. Right. And that brings us then to Proverbs, the 15th. And by the way, the Psalms is another 7. So we have the first 7 in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth. Those 7 divisions. The next 7 divisions close out with the Psalms, and Gary, it's a perfect conclusion.
Yes, it is.
Because the Psalms tell the story of the redemption of Israel, the rising again of Israel, and then Proverbs is as an 8th again. It's a new beginning, another menorah. There are 3 menorahs in the Old Testament. With Proverbs begins the 3rd menorah. The 7 golden lamps, and that takes us to the Hebrew letter Samach. Tell us about it.
Samach.
Samach, excuse me.
Samach. And the letter Samach is a
Samach is Texan for Samach.
I understand, yes. Okay, Samach is a letter that's shaped like a circle with sort of a little loop at the top. It's a little circle. And it's the symbol of support, protection, and also of memory. We'll get into that just a little bit later. But as support, it represents God's encircling presence around a man, where God is symbolized by the circle and man is in the middle of the circle, and he's constantly being protected from the evil of this world by his encircling barrier of protection that keeps out the evil influence of the world. Now, this does remind us of Proverbs, because Proverbs is devoted to warning against all of the evils of this world. Mm-hmm. Stay away from this, stay away from that. The wise man will do this, the fool will do that. Mm-hmm. And so we have that theme running through Proverbs.
And this letter also, Psalmic, Gary, it has a relationship to allegories, gematrias, parables. Tell us about that.
And that's the part that has to do with the memory. That is remembering things. The way we remember things is by interconnecting them. And Psalmic stands for the Hebrew word simanim. And simanim means a sign or a distinctive mark. And it speaks of devices such as gematria, numerical equivalents, acronyms, ending letters, alphabetical acrostics, proverbs, parables, allegories, catchwords, mnemonic devices, any kind of a device that has metaphorical meaning or symbolism that you can use as a memory aid or to discern the deeper meanings of a passage. This is simanim, and this is the letter Psalmic.
Means hidden meanings.
Hidden meanings. It sure does.
Listen to Proverbs chapter 1, verse 6. To understand a proverb and the interpretation, the words of the wise and their dark sayings. There it is, the dark sayings. And chapter 25 of Proverbs and verse 2 says, it is the glory of God to conceal a thing. Wow. But the honor of kings to search out a matter. So we have hidden within the Proverbs the connotation of Psalmic, the 15th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And it's a new beginning, isn't it?
It's a new beginning, and it fits so beautifully, as do all of these letters, fit the meanings of the overarching theme of each of the books.
Which brings us to the 16th division of the Old Testament, Ecclesiastes, and its comparison to the Hebrew letter Ayin.
Ayin. Ayin is the letter of sight and insight, and it represents the eye. As a matter of fact, Ayin means eye, the very name of the letter itself. And the eye, being the organ of sight, is also the organ of intelligence, discernment, and so the letter Ayin becomes the letter of sight and insight. And
that's what Ecclesiastes is all about.
I was going to say, Ecclesiastes, written by Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, he had great insight.
That's a fascinating way of looking at it. That brings us then to the 17th division of the Bible, the Song of Solomon, and its correspondence with the 17th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Pe.
That's right,
Gary?
Pe. With the number, it has the numerical value of 80, by the way, which is a full representation of the number 8, the number of the new birth. And Pe means in the Hebrew mouth. When you say the word Pe, you're pronouncing the 17th letter of the Hebrew alphabet and also the Hebrew word for mouth. Pe has two forms. It has a closed form, and then it has an open form with a long stem, which is used at the final, as a final letter in a word. And so this word then, this letter as the 17th letter, would represent the Song of Solomon.
That's incredible, Gary. Listen to the first two verses of the Song of Solomon.
Okay.
The Song of Songs, which is Solomon's, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. There it is. In the opening statement of the Song of Solomon, the Hebrew word for mouth, Pe, is there.
Wow. What more can you say?
It says open and closed mouth there. That's a kissy-kissy mouth, isn't it?
Very possibly. The sages of Israel say that the closed mouth means that there's a time to listen. The open mouth means there's a time to speak. And certainly we have dialogues
Yeah.
in the Song of Solomon.
Now we come to the 18th division of the Old Testament. It is the book of Isaiah, and it corresponds with the 18th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Tzadi. And that's a fascinating one, Gary. Tell us
This
about
one really is, J.R. The letter tzadi sounds very much like a Hebrew word, tzaddik. And a tzaddik, the noun tzaddik, means one who is righteous. The righteous man, for example, is called a tzaddik.
Yeah, Melchizedek was the king of righteousness.
Right. And so here...
And then there was Zadok, the high priest. His name was really Tzaddik, wasn't it?
His name was really tzaddik. In English it comes out Zadok, or, you know, in Oklahoma...
That's Texas.
There's Texas.
Pronunciation.
But tzaddik is the word, and it means righteousness.
Fascinating. Now the 19th book would be Jeremiah, Lamentations, combined together. And it corresponds with the 19th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Kuf. Gary?
That's right. Before we get
By
to
the way,
Kuf...
I want you to tell you that Gary is the Hebrew scholar around here.
Well, I work at it.
Gary knows several languages, and we appreciate having him on staff. We really do. Go ahead, Gary. Tell us about it.
Before we get to that, I wanted to finish up with tzadi and say that applies to the book of Isaiah. And by the way, Isaiah experienced something that few of us get to experience. He got to see himself in comparison with God.
Yeah.
And he saw himself as totally worthless. But he stood in the presence of the righteousness of God. And for the rest of his life, he operated from a basis of great humility as he prophesied, and he even had a tremendously humbling death as he was killed in an extreme way at the Temple Mount.
He was sawed in two, as I understand it.
That's the traditional story. And
by the henchmen of the wicked King Manasseh.
Yes.
And you know, that's the conflict of good and evil, Christ and Antichrist there, isn't it?
It sure is.
And of course, number 18 there corresponds with Mystery Babylon, you know, and of the 18th chapter of Revelation, because all of this corresponds with the 18th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And with the conflict of good and evil in the serpent candle.
And so Isaiah became a righteous man after completely humiliating himself, or being completely humiliated by God. He is the embodiment of tzaddik. Next we come to the 19th letter, Kuf, and this encompasses Jeremiah and Lamentations, which were originally considered to be a single book. Kuf is the symbol of holiness, and it's the initial letter of the word Kodesh in Hebrew, which means holiness. And so we have here man's holiness, we have God's holiness, and all the symbolic variations of that. And more than that, we have implied in this letter growth cycles. And the Jews go to a great deal of trouble to explain how the letter Kof implies cycles of growth through the history of humanity. Now, Kof can also be pronounced Kof with a long O. And that's the Hebrew word for monkey. And the traditional explanation for this is that man can either grow toward the righteousness of God, or if he makes the wrong choices, he falls to become a beast. And his ending is to be judged, such as the beast of Revelation was thrown into the bottomless pit.
And we can see that in Jeremiah and Lamentations as he writes it immediately following the Babylonian captivity of Jerusalem.
Absolutely.
Now we come to the 20th division, Ezekiel, and its correspondence with the 20th letter, Resh.
Resh.
Tell us about
the
it.
wicked. This is a very simple letter, and its meanings are simple. Wickedness, the wicked person, who is called Rasha, and the judgment of the wicked. That's the theme of this. And we come to the book of Ezekiel.
Rasha.
Rasha. Yes, well.
Is that Oklahoman for the former Soviet Union?
I don't know. We could talk about that sometime.
And it refers to judgment.
Yes.
And Ezekiel is the story of judgment. God's judgment upon Jerusalem. Incredible, isn't it?
It is indeed.
Bringing us then to the 21st division of the Old Testament, the book of Daniel and its correspondence with Shin, the 21st letter of the alphabet.
This 21st letter, the letter Sheen, is a symbol of God's divine power and the divine writing of God, believe it or not.
The divine writing.
Yes.
So Daniel would be a divine writing.
Yes. Book of Daniel.
Wow.
And by the way, when you get into the deeper meanings, which we don't have time to do, this really illuminates the book of Daniel.
Yeah. And finally, the 22nd division, that would take us to the 12 minor prophets. They were considered in the first century and the early centuries as one book, and they have a distinct message: the day of the Lord and the judgment and the redemption. How does it compare with Tav?
Tav, the 22nd letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Tav stands in the Hebrew for the word emet, which means truth. And the symbol of this letter is the symbol of truth and perfection and the ultimate destination or goal of mankind as he finally, after traversing this long and tortured trail, ends up in a state of redemption.
Absolutely incredible that these letters of the Hebrew alphabet should correspond perfectly to the books of the Old Testament, 22 divisions of our 39 books. And you know, Gary, in these 22 books, we have 3 candlesticks. We have a menorah of 7 lamps in the first 7 books, Genesis through Judges, with Ruth attached. We have 7 lamps in the next 7 books, beginning with Samuel and ending with Psalms. And then we have a final 8 books corresponding to a candlestick or a menorah. And fascinating, though, that it has 8 and not 7 lamps. And there is a reason for that. It takes us to 165 BC, and the menorah that was filled with 1 day's supply of oil, and it burned for 8 days, and from that came the Jewish celebration of Hanukkah. But of course, that's another program. And we'll get into that on our next program. We'll be back in just a moment.
In today's Middle East, events change daily. In this turmoil, global finance and politics play a major but confusing role. To help you understand today's news from a prophetic perspective, J.R. Church publishes a monthly newspaper. You'll enjoy his latest research in Bible prophecy. Order an introductory subscription today absolutely free just by calling 1-800-475-1111. When the operator answers, just say that you'd like to receive an introductory subscription to Prophecy in the News. We'll mail you the next 6 issues free with our compliments. Call toll-free 1-800-475-1111 or write to Prophecy in the News, Post Office Box 7000, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma 73153. Prophecy in the News wants you to stay informed, so call or write today. Again, that address is Prophecy in the News, Post Office Box 7000, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma 73153.
Before me is the 1992 Tape a Month Club tapes. We've concluded with the final tape, and I'll tell you, 1992 was absolutely incredible for discovering new things in the Bible. Gary, there's so much here that we've learned brand new that you don't find anybody's commentaries this year, isn't it?
That's right. Not only scriptural studies, but studies of global politics, developments in the Middle East, developments in Russia, and we continue to keep a record of the important prophetic events of each year. And of course, that album that you have there of 12 tapes really is 48 studies, an entire year's worth of prophetic studies, really the highlights, you might say, of the year's developments.
Now, it's 1993, and time to join the 1993 Tape a Month Club. We invite you to do so. We need your help. We need your financial support in order to be able to keep producing these programs and airing them. And so your $100 gift would help us pay for airtime. In return, we'll be sending you a cassette tape each month with the 4 studies of that month that are our television program, the soundtracks to our television program. So if you missed one week, just listen to it when you get your tape. All for a gift of $100. Let me give you an 800 number where you can call us here and order with your Visa or MasterCard. It's 1-800-475-1111. Write it down and give us a call. Now, if you get an answering machine, it'll be because nobody's here to man the phones, or else we're tied up with a bunch of calls. Now, just leave your telephone number and your name, and we'll call you back. But I want you to call and order these tapes. It will be a blessing and a help to you, and you'll certainly be a help to us to be able to keep this program going. Now, if you would like to go ahead and send a check, you could do so. Let me give you the address. Prophecy in the News, Post Office Box 7000, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, 73153. Write today, will you, and say, I want to join the Tape a Month Club for 1993. And at the end of January, we'll send you the first tape. Today's program and last week's program will be on the first side of that tape. And we'll send you this vinyl album in which to house your Tape a Month tapes. So write us today or call, will you, and join the 1993 Tape a Month Club. By the way, if you'd like to have the full set of the 1992 Tape a Month Club, let us know. We can tell you what it'll take for you to get these as well. Gary, it's been a fascinating study. You know, the tapes are important for folks, aren't they?
They really are, J.R. There are a lot of things you can do with audio tape. For one thing, you can quick reverse them. You can hit the review button on your tape recorder, and if you have difficulty understanding a particular note, you can hear it several times until you finally get it to sink in. I sometimes have to do that myself. There's another thing. You can share these tapes with friends. Perhaps at your church, there's not much prophetic study going on. And maybe you'd like to share a few prophetic studies with your friends at church. This is a marvelous way to do it, and I know they'd appreciate it.
I'll tell you, these tapes would be good for pastors.
Yes.
And for Sunday school teachers, because the new findings on these tapes are absolutely incredible, something you will not find in anybody's commentaries. And that's one of the fascinating things about the age in which we live. Jesus said, or pardon me, God said to Daniel, that in the end time, knowledge would be increased. Daniel 12:4.
Right.
And knowledge is being increased today, knowledge of the book. And these prophetic studies are really incredible. So write us today, will you, or call us and join the 1993 Tape a Month Club. I believe that as you write and place your gift as an investment, we'll be able to continue to take the gospel to others across the world, and you will be a part of it. You'll be laying up treasures in heaven. At the same time, you'll be furthering your own study of the Bible. The 1993 Tape a Month Club. Write or call today. Become a vital part of this ministry through our Tape a Month Club. This is J.R. Church and Gary Stearman. Until next time, keep looking up.